Hey everyone, welcome back. You are listening to 한국어천재 on TBS EFM 101.3 in Seoul and the surrounding area. And I am really happy to kick it off with this first comment here because I got Chef Matthew next to me. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
And we just got a comment in immediately for you here. So I'm so glad to just start off the show this way. We're already kicking it off with questions about tomatoes here. Jamin and Asai has a question right away for you. Since we have Chef Matt in the house, I wonder what he can say about tomatoes. What are your thoughts on tomatoes, Chef Matt?
So for like the first half of my life I was with you, I could not do raw tomatoes in any shape or form. And I realized I didn't like raw tomatoes before. I like cooked tomatoes. I like, ketchup. I like, like you're saying, sun-dried tomatoes. All of them are delicious and flavorful. I didn't like them because my mom was just getting bad tomatoes. They were, hard and pale and underripe and out of season. Now, so most of the times I just kind of avoid eating tomatoes in any time that's not summer. Or if they're not, I think here in Korea, like those little cherry tomatoes and the techu tomatoes, they tend to be a little sweeter and juicier and have a little bit more flavor.
True.
But generally, I'm with you. If I go to a place and I'm ordering a burger, I actually don't put a tomato on there. Usually, unless if I know if that place is using good tomatoes. Most places don't, however.
Correct.
Most places don't.
They hide the nasty tomatoes amongst all the other toppings.
Right.
And I'm just like, you can't fool me.
It's
you
just
can't
like
fool me.
pale, pasty, like overly firm, not juicy at all. It tastes like? It just tastes like pink vegetable. It doesn't taste it just tastes like pink vegetable.
I love that. That's what we're renaming tomatoes now. Tomatoes are no longer tomatoes. They are pink vegetable.
Nope.
But there you go. Jamin and Asai, you have Matt's take on tomatoes and the tomato shortage. We're doing quite fine without them here. But, Matt's in the house here because it is Monday, but it is also the week of Chuseok this week here. And so I'm kind of excited because we had kind of prefaced last week giving you guys a little information and backstory on Chuseok itself and some of the kind of staple foods. My personal favorite, we were talking about songpyeon last week. Oh, I love songpyeon. What else did we cover last week?
We also covered chun, which is kind of the staple of a lot of kind of holiday tables. So you also will see this cooked often in the wintertime for Lunar New Year as well. And same thing for the next one, 갈비찜. And 갈비찜 is also one of those, it has those kind of royal court roots to it.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those family gets together. It's just kind of a special occasion. You splurge, you get the really nice meat, and everyone just obliterates this in giant pot of steaming braised ribs.
Oh gosh, you guys, my mouth is already watering. I need to eat before I come on Mondays here. Otherwise, I get hungry. But this week, I feel like we didn't have enough time to cover all the things we wanted to get to last week because there's a lot that goes to Chuseok. And I feel like before we even get into it, we need to kind of talk about how the Chuseok kind of dynamic goes in terms of prepping for it because there's a lot of food, which means a lot of work.
I mean, a lot of families have started already. My family has started the process. I mean, we're not in the kitchen 24 hours a day, every day leading up to it. But when you're cooking for large groups, especially when that large group is family and they have no qualms about voicing their criticisms about the food, then you are on extra thin ice and you need to take extra care to make sure that food is extra good. Lots of extra. Go extra.
Go extra. Be extra. So much extra. And so basically, like, I feel the biggest thing for me, I come from a very large family. Well, on one side, my dad's side of the family is quite a lot of people. Our holidays were packed to the brim, people coming in and out constantly. And I was always amazed by my grandmother just kind of willingly wanting to tackle this on her own.
Sure.
But I feel like it would be much better in terms of you kind of split the work. Would you not agree?
Right. I get where your grandmother's coming from. If you're kind of like the matriarch, if you are the head of the household and you're the one running that kitchen, then you don't want people in your way necessarily. And especially if those people, they're just flying in for the weekend and they don't really know how to cook and they're just there to have fun and drink some wine. It's like, no, get out of the way. Let's get some real work done.
Yeah.
I get where she's coming from. But if you're like most other families where like the work is generally tends to be divided throughout the year, where, maybe you don't really love cooking for those big groups all the time, that's not your big passion, then for sure, kind of splitting the work up and delegating is the way to go. And that's oftentimes what you do tend to see here in Korea. two of the dishes we talked about last week, 송편 and 전, are those kinds of activities where a lot of the family will kind of gather around and kind of form this assembly line to get everything done. With the chun, it's this 3-stage process of you have to slice the vegetables and you have to dredge it in flour and then in egg and then you pan fry it. So if you kind of have one person taking care of like one step along the line, then it goes by so much more quickly.
Yeah, you get your assembly line set up, work together. It'll just make it less stressful if the matriarch will let you do it that way. Exactly. But as you guys know, I always like to tease you with a little quiz here. I want to find out what your knowledge is on whatever it is we're talking about. And today, we're going to be testing your knowledge on our Chuseok foods. Now, if you've been paying attention, this will be a very easy quiz for you. But if you have not, I will be very disappointed. So let's take a listen to our quiz here.
다음 중 보통 추석 명절에 먹지 않는 음식을 고르시오. 1번 잡채 2번 갈비찜 3번 떡국 4번 송편
Beam me up there. Oh my gosh. Where did we get transported to at the end? So we're talking about foods here that don't normally eat for Chuseok. And so, as I said, some of you should be able to answer this quite quickly.
Right.
But we'll go through it one more time here. That first one is 잡채. Japchae. And so what japchae is, here we define it as glass noodles with vegetables.
That's correct.
What would you kind of add to that to describe it a little bit? Because it sounds just like a noodle dish with a bunch of on it.
It kind of is. Yeah. It's usually eaten at room temperature or like a little warm. It's a dry dish, so it's not a dish that has a ton of sauce to it, but instead the noodles and the vegetables, they kind of soak up the sauce that goes into it. Japchae, it generally refers to like the kind of this thin slicing of like the vegetables especially. So that's why you'll also find other dishes like 중국식 japchae. It's something that they have in Chinese restaurants. And that tends to be thinly sliced peppers that you eat with kkotbang, like the steamed bread.
Ooh.
So japchae is, most of the times when you talk about japchae, you're talking about this like a tangmyeon, this glass noodle based dish.
Yeah.
However, keep in mind that there are these kinds of also not as commonly used secondary definitions of japchae as well.
Excellent description there. What's our second option that we have?
Second one is 갈비찜. 갈비찜. And this is how we weed out the listeners who were here last week from the ones who weren't.
Correct.
So 갈비찜 are braised beef ribs.
Oh, and it is good. Now this third one here is 떡국. And oh my gosh, 떡국 there is basically like a rice cake soup, and it's really good. Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite soups, I have to say. But yeah, if you would there be anything you'd add in terms of like describing that there? Would we? It's
always in like a beef broth, more specifically like a beef bone broth, like a 사골육수.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's made with like 양지, with like a brisket as well. So it's a very rich and hearty dish because 떡국, they're really thick and chewy, and then it's in this really rich meat broth. So it is definitely filling, and it's a sweater weather food.
That's a great way of describing it. Oh, Matt's so good at this. And then what was that last one we had here?
We have 송편. 송편, half moon shaped rice cake. Now this is also rice cake, very different from the rice cakes in number 3. These are sweet and not savory. And we talked about this last week, so if you don't remember, then shame on you.
Yes, again, you will have our disappointment throwing at you there. But we're going to give you some time to answer it a little bit here. So first, I kind of want to mention, I'm kind of in the sweet mood right now. I've been kind of craving it all day. I don't know what's up with me.
Well, Kayla, you are always in a sweet mood.
Oh.
Ha, 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 ha.
Wow, Matt, what a great compliment. Thank you so much. Ha, 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 ha. So basically, I kind of wanted to start off while we give them some time here, talking about one of the sweetest things I think I've ever put in my mouth in Korea.
You know what? You might be right.
Yeah.
It is a very, very sweet dish.
Yeah, and that is shike, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh, you guys. How would you describe shike for anyone who hasn't had it?
It's a fermented rice punch. Like, that's how it's most oftentimes described. But Have you ever had mead before?
Yes, actually, in Russia, I drank it.
Doesn't it kind of taste a little bit like mead in the sense that it has, because it's like a sugar-based thing, it's fermented as well. It doesn't taste exactly the same. So mead is essentially, it's fermented honey
yeah.
that's turned into like a beer or a wine.
Correct, yeah.
And it's not dissimilar.
No.
Alcohol content, of course, is much lower.
Of course.
But it does have that incredible sweetness to it. But at the same time, you can still drink it. It's not like drinking just a cup full of syrup.
Correct, yeah.
It has that fermented edge to it, which gives it a lot of complexity and gives it something else beyond just straight sugar.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm going to get so much hate for this, but I'm not the biggest fan of it, which is weird because I love sweet things. I really do. But shike is at the end of the spectrum for me.
Sure.
It is the sweetest thing I've ever put in my mouth. I have had mead, and like you said, they're not dissimilar. But I will say mead has kind of a little bit more of a less sweet, more rich kind of taste to me, and that I made it more palatable. Shike to me, I can get 2 sips in and then it hits me in the face.
Well, you know what? You might not get as much hate as you think because actually looking at the comments, one of our listeners might agree with you actually.
Oh yeah, look at this. 현지 J here says 저는 식혜는 별로 살 씹히는 식감도 이상하고 제가 좋아하는 단맛이 아니라 너무 달아서 개인적으로 안 마셔요. Wow, 현지 J and I are literally the same person. We found this out.
Besties.
Yeah, BFFs. Yeah, 식혜 to me, again, the 식감 as well. 식감 we would say not mouthfeel. That's Konglish.
It's
what would we
more
say?
texture, I suppose.
Texture,
but
yeah.
like literally, specifically the texture of how it chews. Yeah, I think you'll get kind of like a lot of pretentious food writers talking about the chew of a dish.
Yeah, I can't stand the term mouthfeel. It drives me.
Me neither. Okay, thank you. It's texture. The word is texture.
Texture. Thank you, Matt. And so basically, yeah, 현지 Che is on the same side as me. I can't get my mind around the texture of that as well. So for those of you who are interested in making it, it's not that hard to make, is it?
No, it's not. It's probably one of the most, I'm going to check myself here for a second. Yeah, I would say it's one of the most commonly made fermented beverages nowadays that people make at home. That's a lot of qualifiers. But yeah, a lot of people still do make this at home. It's very easy to make. It doesn't require a lot of very precise fermentation or temperatures.
Yeah.
It's fermented very briefly too. So again, you're not making a wine out of this.
Yeah.
You're just adding a little bit of complexity through the fermentation process.
Nice.
But basically, so it's this drink. It's kind of cloudy and clear, and they have these soft rice grains that kind of float inside of it. And the way you make it is you just take malted barley powder, which is coarsely ground with water, rice, and sugar, and you're going to just soak that barley powder in the water. And then you're going to kind of drain it and then replace the water. And then you're going to massage it in there. You know, think of like a lot of very old school, very hands-on techniques here. So let's sit for an hour, repeat the process a couple of times. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cook your rice and then heat that barley liquid up to 40 degrees Celsius. So not too hot and so not too high. It's not going to be, you're not bringing it up to a full boil. And then you're going to pour it into your rice cooker over the rice. And then you just leave it on the warming function. And that's that kind of, it takes the guesswork out of the fermentation temperature for you.
Nice. This sounds like a really easy, something you can do at home. Most people have either a slow cooker or, rice cooker.
That's all you need to do. And we're 90% there. Once the rice begins to float, you just want to strain out the rice, store that separately. We're going to be using that later. And then you're going to want to then bring that fermented liquid up to a boil to stop the fermentation process. By bringing it up to a boil, you kill all the bacteria in there, and it's no longer going to continue to ferment.
Interesting.
Chill everything down, add it all together, enjoy, or in your case, barely tolerate.
I love how Matt's he's like, just in case, for any of you who are like Kayla here, just get one bite in and you're good. But, it's funny because I'd actually been talking with my PT before about it, and I had gotten confused because I always thought that there would be like different flavors of shike as well. But the one I had thought of had cinnamon, like kepigaru. But she said that's not shike.
수정과.
Yes, she said it's 수정과. And is that similar in like, it's not dissimilar from shike?
It's not dissimilar. It has very very similar sweetness levels to it. So again, both of these are drinks that you drink at the end of the meal.
Yeah.
It would certainly ruin your appetite if you had it at the beginning of a meal. It's like it would be like eating a candy bar before.
Pretty much.
But because of the fermented nature of 식혜 and the cinnamon that goes into 수정과, both of these are supposed to be really good at aiding in digestion, which is why you have it at the end of the meal when you get together for these big meals like Chuseok and Lunar New Year as well. And you know, there's a little bit of wisdom here. I mean, I think you tend to see this around the world, not just in Korea. A lot of cultures around the world do end their meals in a very, very sweet drink.
Yeah.
And I think there's something universal about it. So there's something there.
Yeah, I would agree. For me, while I cannot tolerate 식혜, for some reason, 수정과 goes down a little bit better. So if any of you are perhaps not partial to 식혜, definitely try checking that out. The cinnamon kind of adds a little something that makes it more palatable for me. But we are going to get to our question here that I asked at the beginning. I asked you all, what is the one food that does not necessarily eat at Chuseok here? We don't associate with it. And again, we had japchae as our first one there. We had 송편 in there as well. We had 갈비찜 in there, and we also had 떡국 in there.
Right, so that was numbers 1, 4, 2, and 3.
Yep, I nailed that. I wasn't looking at a script, everyone. That's going off book. And so we've got some answers, and it seems like everyone here is an absolute genius. Go Koreans. 현지 최 here's got it. 떡국. Rumi's got it. 제가 확실해. 정답은 3번입니다. The Lost Angel's like, I got this. It's 3. And 현주 Yang also is like, number 3, 떡국. And you guys, 큰 박수. You all got it. It is not, well, I should say the answer is 떡국 because we usually eat that at 설날.
That's correct. So that's a dish that you normally have around Lunar New Year.
And it's good, you guys. It's like Matt said, it's that sweater weather. It's just like curl up and just eat your 떡국. It's so good.
And it's one of those dishes that always comes with that 아재 joke. So they say that if you eat you turn a year older in Lunar New Year here, and when you go with the Korean aging system.
Yeah.
And so you turn a year older after you have your 떡국.
Yep.
And so he's like, if I don't eat my 떡국, then I don't I'm not older another year.
Very funny, sir. Oh my gosh, yes, I'm here every year, every single year. But that leads me to our last food that I want to introduce because we covered 갈비찜 and 송편, the japchae.
Right.
Yeah, what is japchae for our listeners?
Japchae is a noodle dish, and I would say that it is Korea's most accessible noodle dish. Like it's not a noodle dish that is recognizable as a noodle dish when you compare it to other cultures, in the sense that it's not in a broth, it's not very saucy. And
Saucy.
And it's not, and it uses cellophane noodles or glass noodles, all of which are, again, none of these are unique to japchae. There are plenty of dry noodles. There are plenty of glass noodles all around the world, especially here in Asia.
Yeah.
But to be kind of like the most accessible dish in Korean culture, that's all of these things, it's not something that you necessarily associate. But I had a moment where I realized, oh my gosh, this really is it's up there with bulgogi.
Oh, yeah.
It's up there with all the kimchi. It's up there with that first table that you would set up for somebody trying Korean food for the first time.
That's true. It's like up there with, actually my first meal in Korea, I had japchae at the table.
There you go.
It's like the ultimate 한식 set there. Whatever you get out, whether it's served as like a banchan or whether you get the big humongous pile there that they just keep piling onto your plate.
Right.
It doesn't matter. I've eaten almost every single large 한식 meal I've had, it's there.
And it's funny, when we're talking about all of these very accessible dishes, most of the times we're not talking about dishes that are very spicy, that are, covered in gochujang or use a lot of fermented things like doenjang in there. Instead, a lot of these tend to be kanjang based because we'd covered this a couple times in the show. This is part of Korean royal court cuisine, like 방가음식.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those dishes that you can say that it is a very, it is a very refined dish. It dates back to the 17th century from the royal courts. And we talked about, in our tteokbokki episode, we talked about 궁중 tteokbokki.
I remember
the palace-style tteokbokki. This is the precursor to that.
Oh, Oh,
It has the
interesting.
kanjang. It has the beef in there. It has the vegetables.
Yeah. And so it just kind of naturally led to the formation
Yeah.
then of the 궁중 tteokbokki. That's interesting, but like I feel like when I eat japchae here, there's a few staple ingredients aside from the glass noodles, of course,
Sure.
in terms of the vegetables. I feel like I see almost the same vegetables every single time.
Right, it's like carrot.
Yep.
It's spinach,
Yep.
시금치. A lot of times you'll have some form of mushroom in there. So
yeah.
most of the times is 목이버섯, so whittier mushroom, or pyogo mushroom, which are pyogo mushrooms.
I love it.
Yeah, that's their name. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. What else to call them there?
The pyogo mushrooms, I suppose.
Oh,
is what,
nice.
because
Well done.
and then generally some form of meat in there as well. So I didn't know this until a few years ago. I've only had japchae with beef in there.
Same here, yeah.
And my wife was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, no, japchae with pork is delicious." And like, it's like, oh, is this a thing? It's like, it is absolutely a thing. And she's made fun of me for being so bougie. It's like, oh, look at Mr. Fancy Boy only eating japchae with beef.
Oh my God.
I guess like, oh, so sorry, Mr. Rich Man. I'm giving you pork in your japchae, and it made me feel very bad about myself.
Oh my gosh, now I feel like really thankful to everyone who took me out for all my hanchik meals at like 회식 and bought me the beef one because I also have only had beef japchae. Oh my
Very
gosh,
fortunate.
we're very bougie people, I guess, here. But you know, it's interesting that we've got all these other foods that you kind of associate with Chuseok. And like we said, this is not like a regulation. You can certainly have other things at your table as well. These are just kind of the staples that most people
We've
associate.
had tteokguk a couple times for Chuseok. Like, you know, they like a lot of these are just less so like a very like set prescription of dishes. Like we're not talking about like say like where you're doing like chade where you have like a specific order. These are just all beloved holiday foods. These are good time family gathering foods.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. And Matt, thank you so much for being here. I had a blast.
Always a pleasure.